Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to Data Insights, who are the most streamed artists in KSA. My name is Mohammed Shamsi. I'll be your moderator for today. And with me, I have Hazel Savage, the CEO of Mussio. Welcome, Hazel. I also have Chaz Jenkins, the CCO of Chartmetric, and Mark Abou Jaoude. Mark Abou Jaoude, the head of content for Deezer MENAT. I also have Christine Osazuwa joining us from online. She is the strategy director at Pollen. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to the audience for joining us, and welcome to the panel. The first question I want to start off is, there's a lack of, I think, there's a lack of insight when it comes to the regular consumer on how the streaming market works, or how streams are collected, or differentiated between one platform to the other. So my question is, how does one become the biggest artist when it comes to streams? How can you leverage your name into blowing the streaming game up?
It's the way we used to measure success in the music industry was based around money, basically. It was based around economic measurements of success. And so lots of countries had official sales charts. And the number one artist would be the artist who was the biggest artist in the country in that particular week. But what that really meant was that was the artist who generated the most money through sales of CDs in the old days, or sales of 7-inch singles. In the digital world, particularly in the streaming world, those sort of models for calculating success aren't really relevant anymore. Lots of people listen to music without necessarily generating a lot of money. And so there's a big sort of discrepancy between who is the biggest artist and who is the artist who's actually engaging the most people. And that's one of the challenges which record companies are facing all over the world. It's not unique to this particular region or this particular market. But until, so there's several different ways of looking at it and getting completely different answers about who is the most successful artist in each country.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Hazel?
I was just thinking, I'm very loud. I was just thinking there when Chaz was talking, I often think about how I interact with certain artists. And my streaming platform of choice is YouTube. I listen to a lot of YouTube, and Chaz has told me that's one of the biggest platforms here in the Middle East as well. But I often think about how I engage with other artists that it's not just purely through that streaming methodology. So I'm a huge Cardi B fan, and I follow Cardi B on Instagram, and I buy her merch. She releases some new jogging trousers, I want to buy them. Like, she posts up on Instagram stories, I want to follow them. And then I do listen to her music on YouTube as well. But if it's about the share of attention, if it's about the attention economy, it's, as I say, possibly not always directly about the streaming numbers. And something else I think about in that same sphere is, someone said to me recently, say you wanted to spend $100 on your favorite artist. That can actually be very hard to do. There's no sort of direct, there's some of the smart K-pop bands do a lot of physical retail. Cardi B with her jogging trousers and her jewelry, Rihanna with her Fenty brand. But if it's just purely streaming, and I go onto Spotify, or I go onto Deezer, or I go onto Apple Music, essentially by just listening, I'm not massively giving a lot of money to that artist, sometimes with proportional streaming fees as well. So I think streaming is important. I'm a big streaming fan, but I think how we figure out how artists can further monetize and create a holistic career, how do we make it as easy as possible? I love to buy handwritten lyrics. I love to buy the jogging trousers. Like, I love to spend my money on music, and streaming itself doesn't allow me to spend more than just my listens. So I'm interested to see artists build those sort of holistic careers in the space across, and that's global.
I think that concept of building a holistic career is somewhat new to artists in the region. I think they haven't really explored that yet. Mark, maybe you can give us a little more insight on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, things are, at least we talk about the region right now, so many things are getting introduced to the region. Like, even concerts now are like accessible for artists to expand their reach and build like a fan base that is law on retention, that when on the long term you can keep that fan base growing and growing. You just don't rely only on streaming, because on the long run you have to build a career, like a path for you, not just in one place. You have to use so many different tools, and now all the other platforms that you use to reach different user base, and one of them is the offline stuff, offline events now that really will help you engage with users and retain those fans on the long run, which those are the people will engage with you on the long run, and then merch will come later, and then all the things you can invest in the future. So yeah.
I agree with one point, which is building the experience for the consumer or the listener. It's no longer just about taking the content itself. It's about curating, something that's much bigger than just the music itself into an experience that, the listener can get lost into. I think, Christine, maybe you can give us some insight here.
Yes, definitely. I think it's really important to think about, I love exactly what Hazel was talking about in terms of how do you give $100 to your favorite artist. One thing that I would say from an artist standpoint is figure out a way where your fans can give you $100, essentially. And what that might mean might be a Patreon or, be able to take tips, or using the various platforms that allow, artists to accept tips across them. It's really important because your fans hopefully want to spend that money on you. And I think it's a really amazing indicator about whether or not you are developing loyal fans, is if they're willing to spend that money on you. And if you make that possible, that's a really great selling point for, whatever you're trying to accomplish next. It might be maybe trying to accomplish getting funding, for example, as an artist. If you can say, hey, I already have this many fans, this many people that are willing to spend money on me, I think it's a really great way to kind of move that needle, rather than saying, I have 1 million streams, because just like Hazel mentioned, 1 million streams might not equate to that much, especially if they don't stick around. You have 1 million streams because you got a really good playlist placement or a really good sync, but if they didn't stick around, then that's probably not the argument that you're going to be able to make to say, hey, I am developing a great audience, I am retaining a good fan base, and I am making a career of this, rather than getting streams right now and not sure what happens next.
Great. I think just to follow up on that, one of the key questions that we have for today is, for a lot of artists, maybe they don't have the experience or the knowledge of how to use all of these data insights that they can find online. There's so many different services, from Chartmetric to Mussio to Pollen as well. Can you tell us in your own words what are the best way for artists to take advantage of the services that are available in the market right now?
Yeah, great question. I think, so for anyone who doesn't know, at Mussio, we do artificial intelligence, and we work generally B2B. So we work with the other big companies. We work with Sony, we work with Universal, we work with big streaming services. We work with people like Epidemic Sound or BeatStars. And what we do really as a business is we add data to music. So when you upload your music as an artist to a platform, you don't have to fill in 50 fields and describe yourself in 4 genres and tell us the key or how many vocalists you have. We can automate all of that kind of stuff. And so adding better data to music just does make it infinitely more searchable. So hopefully the artists shouldn't really have to do too much. That's the game. And when I first started out building a business, one of my goals was, I don't want to build an app where I charge artists 99 cents to use it. I want to go and charge the big guys because they got the money, and they're the ones who should be reinvesting in this stuff. And so I decided to, sell to the big boys, and the artists should just net benefit. One of our big clients, BeatStars, two-sided marketplace in the US, 20,000 tracks uploaded a day. Production beats, it's where Lil Nas X found the beat for Old Town Road. And so there are 20,000 tracks uploaded a day. Previous to working with Mussio, they were just kind of uploaded there. How you found anything, who knows? Now if you want to find a hip hop beat with a trap sound at 120 beats per minute with no vocal on it, boom, we can do that for you. So aligning yourself with services and just get stuck in. As an artist, just get stuck in. There's no right or wrong. And I say that from my experience building a business as well. When I started Mussio, it's not like, am I on Instagram? Are we on TikTok? Are we on LinkedIn? Are we on Facebook? Are we on Twitter? You don't need all that as a business quite often. As a business, we just do LinkedIn, a little bit of Twitter. That works for us. And I feel like it's totally okay for artists to just figure out their own platforms, figure out their own methodologies, and then, hopefully choose partners that are putting data and putting, working with services like us to better maximize their opportunity. That's what I would hope.
Amazing, honestly. And I hope for all the big record label people, you listen to her, you need to pay for her service. Chartmetric, Chaz, what can you offer us?
We aggregate data from lots of different services. In a sense, that's what consumers do. You know, we like to think in simple terms in the music industry. You know, traditionally, you know, we like to think Spotify is unique, YouTube is unique, and people who use those platforms only use that platform. But the reality is people use lots of different services. You know, somebody might subscribe to Spotify, but they watch videos on YouTube, and they're also following artists on Instagram and maybe watching content on TikTok. So consumers use multiple different services, so we aggregate data from lots of different services. Because if you look at YouTube in KSA, you'll find that most of the big artists on YouTube are all from this region. They're all from KSA or they're Emirati artists. If you look at Spotify, you'll get a completely different picture. You know, Spotify, the biggest artist here at the moment is BTS. And, you know, roughly half of the top artists on Spotify are from outside of the Arab countries on Spotify. So each service is different. Different consumers use them and use them in different ways. But there's so much overlap that we try and present you with data so you can understand the audience behavior right across all platforms.
Is this data accessible to regular users, or is it more business to business?
Yeah, we have the majority of our users are artists. You know, we're used by around about 2,500 record companies, distributors, and other companies as well. But the majority of users, particularly for our free tier, are artists themselves. You know, literally over 100,000 artists at the moment use the platform just to get even just the basic data. Often can provide artists with a foothold and an understanding of how they're going to grow their audience.
I think that's incredibly helpful, honestly, for artists who are just starting out, getting to know the landscape around them, getting to know, you know, who's interested and where are they, and you know what demographic might they be, male or female. Does Deezer offer anything similar?
Yeah, that's the way to go. I mean, we have backstage for artists as well, where you can access all your data, country split, gender split. We also give access to artists to see where they've been playlisted and which playlist and the streams that are coming from those playlists, as well as the selection rate of the songs, which helps also the artists evolve or get to know which song is doing well or where is it doing well, so they can actually produce or evolve their production maybe. So yeah, and there's a lot of data that we have on the back end that's not public, where we also learn, so we test and do beta tests, so we can make it live. So it's always a development on data side for artists, and it all depends on demand. We all get requests all the time about, can you add this feature? So, and this is how we develop the backstage app for artists. Yeah.
So you have that constant dialogue with the artists just to make sure that you're servicing them in terms of their requirements, their needs.
Exactly.
Offering them things that they can actually use.
Yeah, which we help artists to basically it's all about developing them, knowing more about their insights and how they're doing in different markets, so they actually penetrate and do better performance in general.
That's incredibly helpful, I believe, for all the artists that are coming up in the scene. Christine, can you fill us in on how Pollen can support in terms of data insights for growth of artists?
Yeah, so actually, Pollen is a live music company, but we work with artists as bringing them on for do experiences with us. But I spent quite a lot of time. I worked at Universal and I worked at Warner Music Group, and we did a lot of work in the data space. I worked in data. We use Chartmetric quite frequently when we were working with artists to tell them, to help them know what their audience looks like, help them dive into that data, help them understand what's in there. We also use, platforms like, Deezer's analytics, as well as Spotify's analytics, YouTube analytics as well. I think what's really important as an artist or a label that's working in the space is to kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then make focus there. Basically, put your focus in places that you find the most value for. So like Chaz was mentioning with YouTube being a lot more focused within Middle Eastern artists as opposed to Spotify, is you might be very frustrated if you're not performing very well on Spotify if you didn't realize that, Spotify tends to have a lot more, Western artists that are charting on those side of things. So understanding some of those basics so you can make decisions, I think regardless of what platforms you're using to assess the data or, find your audience, I think is the most important thing is figuring out what's meant to work and, what doesn't work and, focusing attention rather than splitting your time across too many things, because if you split your time too much, you're probably not going to get the most value regardless of whatever platform you're actually using.
So it's a matter of trial and error for you and a matter of kind of focusing your energies on the right direction.
Definitely.
Interesting. Now, the next thing I want to go to is considering that we are at XP Music Futures, we've been here for a couple of days. I'm sure like our panelists and the audience themselves have seen the night experience that's been going on. It's been a great, couple of days for these artists to actually go on stage, perform in front of an audience, and actually get to see that reaction. How important do you feel is adding that element, the live experience, in terms of enhancing streaming numbers for these artists?
Oh, well, let me just say, having watched some of the artists from day one and some of the fantastic stuff that was going on last night, it's just so awesome to see. Like, I've seen everything from a mix of some very sort of traditional, I've seen a lot of oud music, which I absolutely love, right through to some of the EDM and the DJs. This is such a random piece of advice. I've really struggled with who the artists are that are performing. No one's got a banner with their name on, and they quickly tell me who they are at the end. And me and my poor husband are like, did he say HAM? Was that a Z? What was he called? And, look us up on YouTube. We're called, and I'm like, oh, what were they called? I want to look them up. So I feel like I've seen a lot of great stuff, but I also would highly recommend a little more in terms of marketing materials, because I've seen some great artists and I've really struggled to find their Instagrams and look them up afterwards, which I think would directly translate into some additional streams, certainly. But in terms of just having the shows on, I mean, I've been blown away by the quality and the type of music, but I kind of expected it. I thought it would be awesome, and it has been.
I'm glad we didn't disappoint, honestly.
Not at all.
The talent has been here for a very long time. It just needed the opportunity to show itself.
Love it.
Chaz?
Yeah, I mean, live for the majority of artists is critical because, they have two ways of most artists have two ways of generating a living. One through recording revenues, one through live revenues. And for many artists, live is much bigger than recording revenues. There's a symbiotic relationship between the two. But in a sense, what artists really need is they need audience acquisition and audience retention. Every artist needs to constantly acquire more audiences in order to grow their audience, but also retain their existing audience as well. And you can only really do that through a whole combination of things. Use of different services, but also that's where live can become critically important as well. Because most definitely in a live environment, you're probably much more likely to be able to build a really meaningful, long-term relationship which you can retain with your audience.
Amazing. And I feel for the live experience as well, for a lot of people, just like Hazel, who are meeting these artists for the first time, seeing them in the flesh and seeing their talent on stage really does build a stronger connection on the long term. I mean, I feel Deezer maybe has some input here as well. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. He pointed that retention, which it's a long-term engagement. If you look at the biggest names in the region right now in Saudi, they still sell out concerts, and they all build those audiences throughout the years. And now everything's converting through streaming. So whenever they drop a song, it hits, and then it all came out of all that relationship they built on offline. And this is, I think, very important for the up-and-coming artists that are going out right now to build that human engagement on ground and retain those people. It's a higher retention for the artist because people really want to interact. They want to see if this actual artist is real or not. So this is very important, and it's part of your marketing that you spend. I mean, digital is great, but if you look at any artist, it's the most, I think, ask question to the artist: when are we going to see you live? When are we going to see you live? I think this is very important. And then after that, it is also challenging how you want to maintain this user base on offline and do more gigs on the same standard, which is also a challenge, but it's very important as well.
Hopefully, with the start and the end of XP,
Exactly,
we're
yeah.
going to be seeing so many more live acts in Riyadh and in Saudi in general. Christine, I'm interested to know your input here.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I work for a company called Pollen, and what we do is put up together live music travel experiences all over the world. When we're deciding what artists to work with, things that we look into is what their audience looks like. Do they have a loyal enough fan base that is willing to, A, go see them live and maybe go see them in places like potentially in the future, maybe Riyadh, for example. And what's really important there is thinking about who the audience is and if they're willing to, if they're willing to travel, if they're willing to follow you where you're going. I think live in general is a really interesting way to find your audience, bring them to you, and then also potentially segment your audience. If you know your audience really well, if you know like your fans very well, you can do things like offer additional add-ons to your live experiences. So in addition to the concert, for example, maybe there's a VIP experience, maybe there's a merch bundle, maybe there's, they can come listen to the soundtrack or all kinds of other things to delight your super fans. It could be offered as a free situation. Think about like Spotify does Fan First, where they do special things for people that listen to you a lot on the platform. So you could do that for yourself potentially if you have super fans, or you could use it as a way to, in terms of just rewarding your fans, or use it as a way to generate additional revenue. So if you upcharge in some way for additional encounters and experiences with you, I think it's really important. That's something we do at Pollen that we find is really valuable to the artist and us, obviously, to our company as well. But thinking about how to delight your fans and monetize on that is really, really important. And live is a special way to do that. That's really hard to kind of replicate across streaming or across YouTube or things like that instead.
So other than live, we mentioned marketing. I'll leave this as an open question for all of you guys. Do you think, the most important tools that artists need to leverage in order to expand that audience? So it's the live experience, it's the proper marketing. What else?
I've got one specific to this region. We've done a lot of research over the past few weeks into looking at, how artists are engaging audiences, how artists are growing.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Do you? There's a couple of things I could say, and there's one thing which is there's a couple of insights which we got which are really striking, particularly if you look at KSA. The biggest artists from this region, if we look across all platforms and sort of estimate, the biggest artists in KSA are all local artists or artists from, countries nearby, Emirati artists, they're all pretty local, which is unusual in the world today. Most artists are, by their nature, in most parts of the world, pretty global, and it's quite common for artists from countries with relatively small populations, such as Saudi. Their biggest market will be another country with a much bigger population. So in one sense, it's really, really encouraging that local artists have a really strong footprint in this market. But by the same token, they don't really have much reach outside of the region. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that to grow big in your own country, you need to grow big in other countries as well, because we live in a very, very globalized world. When I was young, my taste in music was influenced by my friends, but I only had 4 friends because I grew up in the 1980s, and they all lived on the same street as me. So my influence in music was really, really local. Today, we're all connected with people around the world, first and secondary degree connections everywhere. And so if you grow in the rest of the world, which, let's face it, there's a lot of other people in this world, big populations all around the world. If you get growth elsewhere, then that is going to feed back into your home market as well.
So it's kind of along the lines of trying to diversify one's market and reach out to newer markets and.
It's challenging to reach out to other markets, but there's certain things you can do to make yourself more available, accessible, or find connections with consumers in other markets.
Oh, this is not what I thought you were going to say.
Really?
No, this is great.
What was I going to say?
This is another point. Well, no, we were talking the other day about how one of the biggest challenges we have in identifying artists from this region is, and I don't know of a better way to put it, the alphabet. So it's really hard if I'm a non-Arabic speaker and I'm only familiar with the Western alphabet. And that's not to say I think people should be doing music in their own language. They should be calling their band or themselves by their name, whatever they want to call themselves. But when I don't have an ability to access an Arabic keyboard on any of my devices, and I don't know how to search for the things that I might want to search for, it means that artists who are only using the Arabic alphabet, it's really hard to find them on any given platform. And some of the ones that we see do better are the ones that either have a translation or a hybrid approach, because it just means that other countries can find them. And I don't know if that's a challenge, if that's something maybe people go, nope, I want to stick with the Arabic name and I want the rest of the world to catch up. But I guess just at the minute, if I think about countries like the US, the UK where I'm from, or even Singapore where I live, where Mandarin is one of the common languages, or even BTS, the ability to, respect your roots and be true and loyal to your identity as an Arabic artist or a Saudi artist, but also be able to make yourself discoverable. So I thought we were talking about this, and it's hard as well because then on each different platform, the name can be presented differently, spelt differently. If someone's translating your name for you, their own interpretation, and maybe 10 different platforms interpret it differently, and now you appear as if you're 10 different artists, and there's no way to pull that data together and collect your royalties, because it's a bit like the classic example of Beyonce with a little dash on the E or no dash on the E. It was often showing up as two different artists. So I think if people want to go global, looking at a way that we can help them be more discoverable in multi-language scenarios, whilst also staying true to the culture.
I think that's an extremely, interesting and helpful insight, and maybe something that people don't focus on as much, because I agree with the point that sometimes you do find the Arabic artists transliterated in different ways across different platforms. Now, I don't know, Mark, if you could give us some insight here on how that could work.
Yeah, I mean, on Deezer specifically, you have language switch. The metadata itself should be available on Arabic and English, and then you can type either or, and then you find the artist. But what I wanted to add to what Chaz was saying is this: when you want to reach out beyond this market, also where the Arab diaspora is massive, you also need to look into your data and figure out where you want to be, because the Arabic consumption outside MENAT is also very significant. But the key to this also, you need to be very consistent. People don't expect you to come once in a year and then you're building your audience by dropping one track a year and then expect to blow up or do anything across. So consistency is very key to maintain or to keep growing your user base, whether through content on digital or creating new songs from scratch or dropping an album. So consistency is very key. This is how you can also maintain and grow your user base. So users or fans will always expect something from you. But yeah, it's been very challenging, I think. But now with access to data and all of this inside, I think it's very important for labels and artists to use all those tools that are available right now.
And just remain consistent in how they present themselves and how they showcase themselves as well.
I mean, yeah, create your own identity. Some artists really drift sometimes to just very far from what they're doing, and they go back to a different style. So I think consistency with your style or identity is key. You can try different things because you have different platforms now, but also you have a lot of tools to see yourself charting in different places. I mean, you have Shazam and all the other places. So many things are available right now that you can really analyze this data and figure your way out with the same identity you want to do. They just don't switch just for the sake of trending for two weeks and then you're done. So
build your identity, remain true and remain consistent in what you're offering to the audiences.
And I think, did you just mention the Shazam charts?
Yes.
They're fantastic for discovery because they're broken out by region. Yeah. I've seen some really interesting artists pop up on there.
Yeah. They're very localized.
And I was discussing with Chaz. I was like, there's songs that are now Shazamming from released in 2017, 16. I mean, but they're also hits. They're not a hit wonder, or they're not produced to be on a TikTok or on that just be yourself and create your track, and eventually it might trend in the next 3 years. I mean, just you have to be very patient and then wait for it. I mean,
lots of artists sort of change their content. They water down their content. They do something different in order to reach bigger audiences or reach audiences in other countries. And that's never really the way to do it. You know, Latin America, the success of Latin American music is a great example. They haven't changed their content, but what they've done is they've looked at how Latin American artists can build audiences, build name recognition, build loyalty amongst fans around the world. And so often it's not about changing your content. It's just about your identity and how do you make sure people can identify you, can follow you, can engage with you and remember who you are.
And I think, and adding to that, Christine, I want to get back to you just to make one point. I think the internet has offered us the chance for all of us to find the artists that we like and the music we like. The long tail of looking at different artists and finding the sound that you want. You could find an artist that has 200, 300 followers and barely 1,000 listens, but that's exactly what the sound that you wanted to hear. So definitely the different platforms such as Deezer, YouTube, Spotify, they offer that to the audience. You know, they have, it's the paradox of choice in a sense. You have too much choice, but you know what? You have so much choice that you can never feel like you're bored, or you can't find something new. There's always something new for you to go and find out there. Christine, any points, any inputs you'd like to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I think everyone made some really excellent points. I love what Chaz was saying about expanding out, thinking about collaborations with other artists. I think also going to what Hazel was talking about is that don't be afraid to reach out to the rest of the Middle East, especially if you do want to maintain your Arabic identity when you're making music. Is that 400 million Arabic speakers around the world? That there is plenty of opportunity to collaborate with Egypt, plenty of opportunity to collaborate with Dubai, et cetera, to expand out what your market looks like. I think sometimes when people think about collaboration, they tend to default to the West very quickly when there's not necessarily need to. Just like Chaz was saying with Latin music, they do collaborations with the US often, but they also do collaborations within Puerto Rico and Brazil. Someone from those two regions might do a collaboration instead. So think about where you could do those collaborations, what artists you can work with, and thinking about breaking up the regions. I think like Ngami is really interesting because they do charts across different types of music rather than just, it's not just like, oh, here's the Arabic chart. It's like, oh, this is the Egyptian chart, and this is a different sound or different genre. And so if you're interested as an artist in like exploring different sounds, you can actually look and see, hey, who's doing this in this space and figure out that rather than just defaulting to, oh, I need to, maybe I need to sing in English or things like that just to expand my audience.
Can I add one more thing to this? Sure. I totally agree on the collaborations, but again, I'd like to see more happening in this region first. I mean, I'm not generalizing that some are really good and they're happening, but I think it's just still very small compared to what should be done in this region on a collaboration level. For sure. I mean, you don't have to wait for international collaboration to happen when you can have something regional first and then be exposed in different market and in different places in MENA as well before US, but it should happen here first, which is something that's very rare in this region.
I agree 100%, honestly. I sincerely believe in the power of collaboration. I always believe that, two heads are better than one, and when you collaborate with somebody, you get their audience and they get your audience. So it's a win-win for both sides. Christine, thank you so much for adding that point. My last question is going to be the main point of this panel. Considering the fragmented landscape of streaming across the internet, how can we truly find out who is the most streamed artist in KSA?
Well, I can start with that one, but I feel like Mark's take is maybe going to be more interesting as a streaming service, because I run an artificial intelligence company, and our take on how we find these artists is slightly different. And the approach that we've taken so far, again, my company's based in Singapore, and we do a lot of activations in Asia and Southeast Asia with brand partnerships. So, Vans, the footwear company, they do a talent search every year based out of China called Musicians Wanted. They get like 10,000, 20,000 submissions. All of this is original music that isn't on streaming services. And they use our technology to be able to filter through that large volume of music, and because no one's going to sit and listen to 10,000 songs. Like, I don't know, I used to have a curator that worked for me in a previous job, and he could do 200 a day. So, you know, times that by the number of entrants, that's more days than anyone wants to listen to music. Especially when, you know, it's all unheard of. That's quite difficult on the ears as well. So what we do is we use artificial intelligence to be able to analyze every single audio file that's submitted. Firstly, we can tell you that it's definitely an original composition that's been uploaded. Secondly, you know, when bands give us insights like we're looking for hip hop artists, we're looking for avant-garde artists, we want equal male and female vocals in the final shortlist. We're looking for, you know, high quality production, we want ready to go, you know, quality of recording. I can use all of the data that Mussio produces to be able to narrow that down to, say, a shortlist of 50 per territory, and then pass that to the A&R teams in a large brand. So it's different for us because we're not a streaming service. We're a technology company. But I'm excited by these large brands that want to invest in music in sort of new and markets that aren't basically Europe or America. So China, Japan, Australia, the Philippines, Indonesia. And I see there's an opportunity for that here as well in the Middle East. You know, if there are large brand partnerships that want to throw something together, you know, that's the discussion that I want to have, because I'm excited that our technology can find stuff that hasn't previously been discovered. And if that can create more opportunities, that's kind of why I started the company, Mussio, to be able to do this. And we did a little, just to wrap up, we did a little example piece on this, again, using the Shazam charts. So I actually used to work at Shazam 10 years ago, so I'm always a big fan of their data insights. But we analyzed all of the music from the charts in Israel, Morocco, Jordan, Saudi, all the territories we could get access for. And we asked our AI to sort of hit predict which ones were the biggest bangers, so to speak. And there's an article featuring 8 different artists from the region on the Mussio blog right now. We found some great stuff, an artist called Echo in Israel, and a real variation. Some were huge already, and I just didn't know them. And some were hardly any streaming services, but with potential. So I'm excited about this, and I'm excited to see at all times how I can sort of help use our technology to discover hopefully the next big streamed artist.
I will be definitely checking that article out. I am very curious to see who
we found.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mark?
Let's break it into different...
Let's break it down. Feel free to break it down as much as you want.
No. Generally, I think it's a broad type of, like, if you want to pick one artist on a broad genre level, it's hard. On a consumption base, if you want to say. You know, you have different type of genres in Saudi. You know, obviously you have the
Khaliji music, you have hip hop,
rap,
you have dance music.
But the way I see it, I think there are different artists for different genres that are top. There's no top one artist, because now things are developing and you have to wait and see. And different platforms have different consumption as well. Like, you know, YouTube, Deezer localized, Spotify has a different chart, so each platform has a different chart based on the user base they have, right? So the way I see it, I think every genre right now has a specific, like international is international, you can say BTS, but you have a lot of local artists that are killing it right now. You have on the rap scene, you have Lil Easy, you have Saud, you have a lot of artists that are doing, which is something that hasn't been there for a long time, right? But they're performing really well. But you also have on the pop side as well, which is something on the Arabic pop as well, and you have on the Khaliji. So overall, it's just hard to define one big name where the diversity in genre right now is totally different than before. I mean, it was all Khaliji before. Now you have so many different. So you have a lot of artists that are doing really well right now, and I think we'll have to wait for that. But generally, I think it's just hard to define one specific artist. Specific artists are in specific genre again. So every genre has a top artist. This is how I would define it.
It's good to know that the music scene is diverse enough to be able to have multiple artists that, you know, each of them conquering their own category or their own hill. That's encouraging for me to hear, and that's definitely encouraging for the audience to actually enjoy it.
Yeah, otherwise if you want to be top artist, you're gonna have to stick to what's trending here, and that's not your identity anymore. You have to do what you want to do, and then you can be the top of your genre specifically, you know? And then again, that starts from Saudi, and then eventually songs travel. Like you have Hajjaj now is doing really well in Saudi and worldwide. You have Mish'al that is also Saudi, and so again, I can't compare a Khaliji artist with Mish'al or a rap artist with Hajjar. So it is different, but so many big artists eventually are on the rise, and they'll be killing it.
Chaz, it's your time to save us.
Yeah.
Who is the one big artist who rules them all?
I'm gonna give pretty much the same answer. It depends what service you look at. So if you and part of the issue with really identifying definitively who is the biggest artist here is that Angami doesn't make available to us as detailed a data as some other services for the region. Now, Angami is, of course, a huge service here. So without having the really detailed data there, it's very difficult to do a comparative analysis along with YouTube, for instance, who does provide really detailed data. So at the moment, it changes on a daily or weekly basis. You can just go on, you can just look at basically the YouTube top artist chart on Chartmetric for Saudi, and you will see on a weekly basis who is the biggest artist here. Is that really the best metric to be using? No. You'd definitely want to consider Angami as well. And also you'd want to look at TikTok data. Now, TikTok does provide fabulous data, but it doesn't break down every single country in detail yet. But we get detailed data for about 21 different countries for TikTok. Saudi, the data is just not detailed enough to be able to build into all the other data and say definitively this is the biggest artist. But there's a lot of data which you can look at and get a sense. And likewise as well, just to flag, artists outside of the region, Mish'al is quite significant, because of the diversity of the content he's produced and the range of countries in which it's available.
Okay. Christine, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes down to it, part of it that I would always question is, does it matter? Meaning, there's so much needs to be done. There's so much work to be done. There's not there's not a superstar because there's a lot of work left to be done. So really, at this point, doesn't matter if you said, oh, this person is the biggest artist in Saudi Arabia. The second biggest is probably right on their toes if there is one, because there's just so much opportunity right now. Like if you look at the Spotify charts and look at the amount of streams the number one track is getting, we're talking thousands of streams, and it's population that is quite large actually. So if you think about it from that perspective, like there's so much opportunity to maybe have a definitive answer, but everyone can easily right now be in their own lane and actually completely thrive in this market if, especially if we do collaborations, if people start doing live shows more, if there's so many all these other options to do to become a huge artist in the region and, further out as well. But right now, part of the bright side of that, like not having that definitive answer, is because there's just so much opportunity to maybe be the most streamed artist or the highest ticket selling artist or the biggest in merch or whatever it might be that you're as an artist is aspiring to become. It might not be, I want to be the biggest streaming artist. You might want to have some other aspiration that you're aiming towards, and hopefully we'll see more of that happening over the next few years.
Hopefully. I really hope so too as well. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I think we had a great discussion today. I'd like to open up the floor to the audience if anybody has any questions. Halal, welcome.
Yeah, hi. I like hard numbers and data, to be the user base. If we can, when I went to the Wall of Sound and Anghami workshop yesterday, they said that Anghami has from 4 million to 5 million users in Anghami. I'm curious to know if there's any data of how many users in Saudi Arabia are on Spotify and how many users are on the other platforms. That's the first question. Second question is there's view counts and there's revenue generation. So not necessarily every view is going to translate into a sale. And management company contracts, there's language that if you generate this amount of money for an artist, you get to keep the management contracts. And if you fail to generate this amount of money in X amount of years, then the artist has the right to pick a different management company. So is there a way to trace the sales? And specifically in the physical world with barcodes. Like, is there a way to unify the barcodes of merch and ticket sales and to have that integrated with the data that we get from streams and mechanical royalties? So I'd like to know if there's something we can do in that regard.
Well, I can just start with that. So luckily for me, I'm not working in music streaming anymore, but I used to work for Pandora. And I think always be careful with user numbers. Not interesting, active user numbers. So, because I've worked for a platform and they go, oh, we've had 100 million signups, we've got 100 million users. But if they've only got 5 million daily active users, that's a much more important metric. Those are people who are using the service. So always push people on their metrics. What are their active users? As I say, I'm not in the streaming biz anymore, so I don't have definitive numbers for the region. But as a second comment on the other element you asked about, which was how do you make sure that the correct monies are paid, and you know, talking about like prohibitive management deals. I think as a startup, you know, my company started 4 years ago. I have a lot of other friends who are founders who are working in the monetization space. There is a lot of work to be done to make sure that artists get paid properly and that royalties are tracked correctly and that all the systems hook up together. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people very high up in the industry and a lot of big companies who benefit from a lack of transparency. They make a lot of money because no one really knows where it goes. And you know, people always said to me when I started out as a tech founder, why don't you sort of build a licensing and royalties company, get it all on the blockchain, make it transparent? And I was like, because people don't want it. Or the people who I would need to work with to make it happen don't want it. And that's a challenge, but that we know it's a challenge is a step in the right direction. That there are startups working in this space, challenging how you are more transparent with royalties, how you track those payments so that they come together is important. And that work is being done, but it is kind of slow going. But yeah, you're asking all the right questions. Ask about the active users and make sure you work with good payments companies. And I think there are some really exciting ones coming out there. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have solid answers at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to say, none of the big DSPs, no DSPs, full stop, really make available publicly their subscriber figures or user figures for each individual country. You know, they are sort of available confidentially, but they can't be put in the public space. But with regard to revenue figures, I would suggest always as an artist, make sure you have access to the revenue reports you get from distributors. Make sure you always have the login details so you can see the individual line data provided by the distributor.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. I'd love to open up the floor for more questions, but I think we're out of time. Myself and the panelists will be here in case you guys have any questions you want to ask us in person. Thank you so much for attending. Guys, good job.